Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 5 Minute Wine Lovers. Today we'll be talking about Rudy Kurniawan, his early life, and what led to his worldwide known scandal. He was born on October 10th, 1976, in Indonesia. He's known as a criminal and a perpetrator of wine fraud, which was sentenced up to 10 years of imprisonment back in 2013 and was expected to be released in November 2020. Upon his release, he was expected to be deported back to Indonesia, but the state has agreed to welcome him for a short interview while judges and lawyers are still working on his deportation paperwork. So, after this brief introduction, Mr. Kurwan, could you please tell us a bit more about the case you got arrested?
Hi, and thanks for welcoming me here. I've got to say, it feels pretty nice to have a change of atmosphere after my 10 years in my tiny cell. Actually, it was better than I expected. To be pretty straightforward, I've been sentenced after my master plan, selling thousands of fake wines after blending old and newer vintages from cheap wines of California in my home in LA. And basically, I was selling them off as more expensive and premium wines.
Wow, that is a story, I must say. But if I may ask you, so many people were following the scandal and were wondering, how did you manage to continue this fraud, which is considered to be the largest case of wine fraud in history, and most importantly, make it last for so long? As reports say, the fraud lasted 8 years from 2004 to 2012.
Well, despite being qualified as a criminal, I have to admit that, and arguably, I am a refined aficionado, a gifted taster, and a connoisseur. As a matter of fact, if it wouldn't have been for my wine knowledge, my fraud wouldn't have lasted for this long. Before this fraud actually became a reality, I managed to build myself a status and an image in Los Angeles by attending and winning first prizes at national and international blind tastings. I must say that this is a detail that allowed me to fool even the biggest and most known connoisseurs into their own game. Also, another point that is rarely mentioned during interviews, but that I still consider relevant and important, is that the most expensive wine that I used to sell were so rarely drunk that only a few could claim to be experts on how they tasted.
Indeed, this final point mentioned is a detail that never crossed my mind. I know that for a while you were known as Dr. Conti for the large amount of Domaine de la Romaine Conti that you bought, and that's when people started becoming suspicious. But now tell me, when would you say was the turning point of your downfall? What initiated this whole scandal?
So actually, I think there's three events that led to my arrest. First of all, in 2006, I was in an auction with my friend John Capon in New York, and I sold actually 8 magnums of 1947 Chateau Lafleur. And later on, someone from Sotheby's noticed that only 5 magnums of 1947 Lafleur were actually produced. So he's starting suspecting me. In April 2007, I sold magnums of 1982 Chateau Le Pin at Christie's in Los Angeles. But after Le Chateau Le Pin contacted Christie's and told them the bottles were fake. And finally, in 2008, I sold bottles from Domaine Ponceau in Burgundy of their Clos Saint-Denis appellation. And it was ranging from 1945 to 1971. But Laurent Ponceau, the owner of Domaine Ponceau, checked, and actually, Clos Saint Denis was only produced since 1982, so that's why he knew they were fake.
Really one of a kind. I, however, still have one last question myself. So, many articles mention that you managed to trick some of the most qualified experts of the United States. But how did they remain silent and did not choose to come forward during your trial? How would you explain their reactions? This is really crazy.
I think they're just embarrassed. It's hard to admit and to accept being a victim of a scam on a topic you dedicated your life to. That's why many famous collectors, connoisseurs, amateurs decline to testify against me.
Right, I see. Well, thank you very much for your answers and your time. As well, for our listeners, if that would like to find out more about this case, a documentary called Sour Grapes, released in 2016 by producers Ruben Atlas and Jerry Rothwell, covers more details about Curwen's intriguing case. Thank you very much for listening. Until next week for another episode of 5 Minute Wine Lovers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.